Hey everybody, we're talking about the Revolutionary War and the shot heard around the world. Part 1. Well, we know that the First Continental Congress met in response to all of these acts that Parliament was passing, and the colonists were just not too happy about them, especially the intolerable acts. So you see 11 of the colonies come together. They send delegates to Philadelphia for the First Continental Congress of 1774. They agreed to continue protests. They sent a petition to the king. They organized a militia in each colony. They also planned to meet again the next year, which basically is a big step for these colonies altogether, because if you remember, dating back to the French and Indian War, nobody wanted to give up any power. They didn't want to come together and actually work together for the betterment of the country. Among the delegates that met at Philadelphia were Sam Adams, John Adams, Richard Henry Lee, no, he's not related to me, Patrick Henry, and George Washington. So you'll see these people again, just as you continue to see them. You've seen them before, you'll see them again. They drafted a statement of grievances, and they asked King George and Parliament to basically repeal all these 13 acts passed since 1763. You see the colonists basically show their emotions. They're kind of in their feelings, and of course they have the right to be. They're upset not only because of the proclamation line that was drawn after the French and Indian War, but they are upset about all these taxes that they did not want to have to pay, all this extra money that they felt like they didn't need to have to pay in order to cover their war debt. So they're all upset, and they're ready to say, hey, we're going to fight back at this point. But before they decide to fight, of course, they want to try to make peace, get Parliament and King George to kind of back off. So you see in Massachusetts, men gather together, they train as Minutemen. Basically, they're ready at a minute's notice. They begin to stockpile their weapons all around Boston. And then King George gets the bright idea, hey, maybe I need to send a few troops to kind of keep an eye on the colonists, especially in Boston. So you see several thousands of troops under the command of General Thomas Gage. They begin to march around Boston. They're trying to intimidate the colonists, and they begin to call, the colonists call these British soldiers redcoats, and they harass them as they pass by. So on April 18, 1775, you see about 700 British regulars. They didn't call them, soldiers. They call them the regulars. They leave Boston and basically going to march to Lexington. And they were looking for, weapons of mass destruction during this time. And they also were going to arrest the Sons of Liberty. So they wanted to basically, get rid of this group that are known for protesting and trying to, basically get rid of anything or anybody that doesn't like Parliament or does not agree with King George. So you hear the committee of correspondence hear of what's going on. So you see them actually go out to warn people. And this is where you hear, the British are coming, the British are coming. But in actuality, they actually said the regulars are coming, because they always call them the British regulars. And I know in the history books it says the British are coming. That's not true. Among those people, contrary to what you think, a lot of people think Paul Revere is like the only committee of correspondence member to actually say the British are coming. But you have Paul Revere, William Dahl, Sam Prescott, and about 70 other people from the surrounding area all come together. They're going out warning people in different areas through different colonies to say, hey, the British are marching around, they're looking for these weapons, and we think something is about to happen. And again, as they were approaching Lexington, Massachusetts, you hear the first shots of the war fired. About 9 Minutemen were killed, and the British left Lexington and went on to Concord. At Concord, several hundred more Minutemen fought the British on the Old North Bridge. The British regulars searched the town for 4 hours, again looking for more weapons, and they turned around and go back to Boston. But as they would turn around and go back to Boston, they had a surprise. And that surprise were several hundred Minutemen who were actually waiting. They had all learned how to use guerrilla warfare to help them. So they were waiting to ambush these British regulars. And they ended up wounding about 174 and actually killed about 73 British soldiers. So again, this is where the first shots are fired. This running battle between Lexington and Concord as the British are trying to retreat back to Boston. This is going to be the start of the Revolutionary War. Again, you have about over 2,000 Minutemen who basically come to aid each other at this point. It's a 20-mile route back to Boston. They're sniping, they're shooting, they're chasing the Redcoats, and they're killing a lot of them. And they're pretty fired up at this point. They're like now or never. So they're all, ready to fight and actually fight for the opportunity to be independent. There was no formal declaration of war. Once General Thomas Gage began to march his troops all over Boston, trying to intimidate people. They were just like, the colonists were saying, hey, it's now or never. And when they began to go around trying to seize weapons, the colonists knew, hey, we've got to jump into this. And so there was no formal declaration of war. And there wasn't like, hey, meet me here to fight here or meet me there to fight there. They just basically, they began to engage in battle as these British soldiers were coming around to intimidate and take their weapons. So the fighting lasted between 1775 and 1783. Actually, within the last few years of the war, it's not actually a battle. You just see a lot of negotiations and treaties being drawn. So in May of 1775, the Second Continental Congress actually met. You see John Hancock be the president. Jefferson, Franklin, Lee, Henry, and Adams are also delegates once again at this Congress. And they're all meeting to say, hey, we've got to go ahead and have this war. They began to basically set up a government for the colonies, independent of the government maybe they already created under the charters. They established a post office. Ben Franklin is going to be the postmaster. They create a committee to correspond with foreign nations because they know they're going to have to reach out for help from other countries. And they begin to establish a Continental Army saying, hey, we need all these militias to come together, create one large army to protect America. And guess who's going to be the commander? George himself, George Washington. Many of them really wanted to try one more time to extend an act of peace with King George, and they call it an olive branch. If you've ever seen in any type of religious book that talks about an olive branch is basically saying, hey, I want to extend my hand of peace to you. And so what these colonists who were part of the delegates who were part of the Second Continental Congress decided, hey, instead of us jumping into an all-out war, let's see if we can extend our hand of peace to King George and Parliament so that we can come to terms with us being independent, with America being its own country, being peaceful. They don't have to worry about taxing us. We don't have to worry about harming them. And so they tried to extend that olive branch to King George. So what do you think King George is going to do? Or what is he going to say? How will he react to these colonies, these British colonies wanting to be American colonies and wanting to break away from English control? The Second Continental Congress also decided to create a Continental Army, and like I stated, they did want George Washington to be the commander of their army. They trusted George. Everybody trusted George Washington. Originally, the colonies did not have a real united army. Each individual colony had militias. And then you begin to see all these volunteers say, hey, we're going to join this Continental Army. Because America was still kind of a baby country. You don't see a lot of people with a lot of weapons. They brought weapons from home. They brought anything they could use, frying pans, knives, axe, anything that they could use to actually protect themselves in the midst of this battle. You see people join to say, hey, I want to protect my way of life. I want to protect the fact that I came to America for religious freedom, to become wealthy, for whatever reason. And I want to protect that. I don't want the British to take it away from me. I don't want to be under their thumb for forever. And so people begin to volunteer and enlist in the Continental Army, bringing their own weapons, bringing, a few snacks and biscuits and stuff like that with them, their own gunpowder that they've worked hard to get. But it still left the American colonists, these soldiers who were fighting for the Continental Army, at a big, huge military disadvantage because Britain was still the largest. They still had the largest navy, still had the largest army. So the colonists, they weren't a match to that in the beginning of the war. And you'll see that be a disadvantage for the American colonists. So each side had a plan to win the war. England had their side, and the colonists had their side as well. And so England basically said, hey, we're going to seize the Hudson River and cut off New England from the other states, capture Philadelphia, and then keep the war in the north. So basically their plan dealt with anything in the north, in the northern colonies. And just start thinking, why would they want to, keep the war in the north, seize the Hudson River up north, cut off New England from the other states, and capture Philadelphia? The colonists' plan to win included invading Quebec, which is basically what they did during the French and Indian War, protect Philadelphia, their main center of important information, basically like the capital of the 13 colonies at that point. That was the capital. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania was just that meeting area, the sacred place where the delegates came together.